Hey friends, it's me, Lauren Hope of Good Girl Chronicles, and as promised, we have an expert here with us today to talk about something on my channel that's been really juicy lately. DICK pics. Dick pics, and how I feel that unsolicited, that's the issue, unsolicited dick pics should bring us to a larger conversation about consent. There's a lot I know as a 36-year-old woman, but I wanted to bring in somebody with some expert opinion. So joining me today is Joy Donaldson. She is a therapeutic sex educator. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited. Joy and I met through a storytelling organization a couple years back, and now here we are.
Here we are. It's so wild that we went from
Here we
that
are.
space into now, into
I
this
know.
conversation.
I think that was probably like, gosh, has it been like 3 or 4 years?
I think so. I think we met in late 2018 is when we officially met. Because I think that
Yeah.
was your
So,
class. I think it was October 2018, and mine was March 2018.
yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep, I saw your story. Yeah.
Shout out to This Is My
So
Brave.
yeah, shout out to This Is My Brave. Honestly, This Is My Brave is a storytelling organization that highlights the stories of people with lived experience of mental illness and or substance use disorder. They're now allowing teens to have that space. They do so much amazing stuff. And I've connected with so many beautiful spirits, including Joy, all from that nonprofit. I'll put their information in the description below if you want to support that or find out more who they are. They're thisismybrave.org.
Yes.
All right, so Joy, you are a therapeutic sex educator. Tell me the name of your business.
So the name of my business is called Sacral Ground. Sacral Ground is, if you're into the chakra, sacral is where we hold our spaces for intimacy. It's right next to the root chakra. So that's where we ground ourselves. It's kind of like their raw sexuality. And sacral, especially for people with vulvas or identify on the feminine spectrum, that is where we house a lot of our energy. And I wanted to really highlight that space because it's often not really paid attention to. Like we look at the root of things, we talk about our crown and how we think, we talk about our solar plexus, is where like our belly and all those things are. But especially for those of us that deal with reproductive issues, that is our sacral. So it's really important for me as someone who deals with endometriosis, someone who is also a sexual assault survivor, for me to highlight the sacral. And of course, ground. We want to ground ourselves. We want to bring ourselves back to center. And that is why I named my company that particular name.
That is so powerful and makes so much sense to me. As I've been learning things as a peer specialist in the many pathways to recovery and the many ideals around spirituality, body, and self, that's how I came to learn about chakras. But you're right, there's not always a lot of conversation about the sacral area. And I met someone else who was just telling me, like, being a female, what an intimate thing it is to have sex.
Yes.
We're just gonna be honest, you're letting a man enter you,
Mhm.
which is really deep. And I think when she said that, I was like, now I'm a very spiritual person. So I was like, okay, God said sex is important. He made it to be beautiful.
Right.
And I was like, oh wow. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like a light bulb
Yeah.
went off,
It's
when
like,
she explained that to
oh,
me. Now
right.
that all comes together. And
Yes.
so tell me why you wanted to become a therapeutic sex educator.
Yeah, of course. So, as I said, I am a sexual assault survivor. I am also a molestation survivor. And for
Wow.
me as a kid, when I get fascinated or obsessed with something, I have to find out everything about it. I am a natural researcher. I don't know if it's the Virgo in me. I don't know if it's just me being an only child and a perpetual nerd, but I have to look up things. I have to find out more about something if I'm interested in it. So before I dealt with molestation, I was really fascinated by sex, but I was didn't really know where to go with that. Like I would be the kid falling asleep watching the Ninja Turtle movie on Cinemax and then wake up to real sex and be like,
I
oh,
know.
yes. But I also grew up in church. So I had a really hard time trying to reconcile the two. And then dealing with molestation that happened around the time I was 8 years old. And that
Mm,
was when I realized that for me, I remember being in my cousin's bedroom playing with her Barbies and saying out loud, I could no longer be a kid. And taking my power back meant standing in the spaces that I allegedly couldn't be in because I am a survivor. Typically, when we think about survivors, and that those are who I highlight with my particular work, I highlight those that have dealt with the trauma of being assaulted. And I also have a Rolodex, even though we don't use Rolodex anymore. I have a Rolodex of actual therapists that I can send them to be like, hey, I'm helping them on this end. Can you help them on this end? And so I don't, that is my focus, especially Black women survivors, because we typically fall through the cracks because we're expected to be okay. So as a Black woman survivor, as someone who's also a mom, who wants to make sure that these conversations are being had. I was never given the sex talk. My mom literally bought me a Judy Blume book and said, here you go. And so I learned about masturbation. I learned about assault. I learned about my cycle. I learned about all of that through Judy Blume. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Judy.
wow.
I learned
Yeah.
about all of that through her. And I got fascinated with it, but I was also dealing with the fear and the guilt of religion telling me that I'm not supposed to know these things. So I
Very, very
decided to stand in that space and say, no, I want to learn about these things. I'm allowed to nerd out about these things. And as a survivor, I should be able to enjoy sex outside of what somebody did to me because
Mhm.
it wasn't my fault. And
Yeah.
for me, it's really important to share that message and not continue on the path of, well, what happened? What did you do? Why does it? What they
Yeah.
chose to do has nothing to do with me. But my healing is my purpose. My healing is on me. And this is how I'm choosing to heal.
Yeah.
And I am pro ho. I am pro sex worker. I am pro choice. I am just
I
that's
just
who I am.
love you said so much there, and I didn't realize until this moment how much you and I have in common.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like a lot, even about our childhood experiences. I try to I say the first time my sexual desire or drive was aroused was at
Yeah.
the hands of a family member.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until my early 30s that I was like in therapy and I was like, what do you mean that was bad? We were all playing house.
Yep.
We were all
Yep.
playing house.
Yep.
And because we were all playing house, I just thought that's what kids did. But
Same.
then as I got older and started to have
That way.
sexual relations, yeah, you're like, well, why do I still think about that thing? Or why do I? And then you feel dirty for liking what this person did to you that shouldn't have done that to you. And so, yeah, that's really, and what you said that really stood out to me, being able to enjoy sex outside of what someone has done to you is huge because I also identify with you on I was sexually assaulted last year, which I've talked about a lot on this channel. And that had an impact. And I've been honest with people on this channel that I did what a lot of women do when they're homeless. I'm just going to say that. And it was a survival tool, and I'm not proud of that. And because I was raised as a Christian, I have struggled with feeling okay with myself, feeling like a good person or redeemed or worthy I of that. Like literally I was like, she is singing my life song.
Oh, we were all playing house. We were all
Right.
doing this. The person that molested me was also molesting a cousin of mine. And this was a family member of mine as well. We were around the same age, give or take a few years. And so for me, it's, oh, this is my cousin. He's doing this, he's doing that. This is typical. No one ever sat me down and said, let's have the good touch, bad touch conversation. Let's talk
Mm,
about these things. And the guilt that I felt with someone's paying attention to me. Like I said, I'm an only child. I lived in a house with all the adults, my grandparents and my mom, who were like, ugh, what is this tiny person and what does she want? And so
right.
I was dealing constantly with that. So when I would have family members over, it was always like, yes, somebody else is here. And it was just a switch one day.
Mm.
I was not the one at fault. Even he was not the one at fault. Because we were
Correct.
both children. Was it right what he did? No. And that is something that in sexology, we learn about those things as well. And those are the things that fall through the cracks because they're like, oh, they're just being kids. It's like, no, we have to watch that. Yes, curiosity is there, but we have to watch that and figure out, okay, where is this stemming from? Are they reenacting something that happened to them? Are they
Correct.
reenacting
Correct.
something that they saw? What's
Correct.
are they just curious? Let's have a conversation without
Yeah.
shame and let's talk about this instead of telling the girl that she fast and instead of telling the
Mhm.
kid that you ain't where you learn that from. You can't do that. This is the perfect time to have a conversation. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I had to sit myself down and go, let's talk about this and realize that the adults that were supposed to be there either did not have the ability or just chose not to.
Mhm.
And I had to reconcile that and decide that, you know what, that's what happened. And I cannot hold myself to somebody else's choices. I
Right.
cannot allow myself to be in that space any longer than I've already done it. It's not mine. And
Yeah.
so that day I decided, you know what? I still haven't gotten into a space where I have quote unquote forgiven him, but I did have to get into a space where I forgave all those adults, and all three of those adults are gone now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my grandparents and my mom are all gone. So
Oh,
I had
wow.
to really come to that. You want to talk about breaking curses? That's a
Right.
broken curse. I have to let go of this. My therapist also said that same thing of who are you putting on pedestals that never asked to be there?
Right, 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 right.
So you're expecting these people to save you when they don't have the ability to. So now what do you do?
Right.
So that was where I really came into an understanding of, okay, you didn't have the ability or you just chose not to. I can continue to be mad at you. I can continue to form my life around the choices that you made, or I can make the decisions for me and decide to move on.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm continuing to do. It's never a space where it's always right. I don't always get it right every single time, but I'm so much farther than I was before. And for
Yeah.
that, I am eternally grateful.
It's all part it's all part of the journey. And we might do this in a two-parter because I don't want to just glaze over the things that we're saying because they're
Yeah.
very important. I've talked a lot about what really was the catalyst or change for me on this channel is when I kind of, really I'm estranged from my family. So I don't have a lot of contacts with I don't have any contact with my mother or my stepfather. And the family member that it's even hard for me to say the word molestation.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
family member who did that to me, we don't have I've separated myself from that person. I told one other person, had told his brother, and his brother was like, wow, like I'm really sorry. Like I didn't know. And so then on my channel, I wanted to be about transparency because secrets keep you sick. And that is
Yes.
just over a gambit of things. However, and this might not be the case, I feel like what we're discussing happens a lot in black homes. Like, does it happen a lot? Or are we just now talking about it more? I mean, because it's not just a black issue, but I meet so many people in the black community, my brothers and sisters, who share this experience, and I'm not sure why or where that comes from. Why it seems more pervasive in the minority community.
It's interesting. One of my I don't know if I want to call it like most popular. I don't know, but I did a series last summer called Summer Simmer Sessions, where
Okay.
it was a 4-part series, and the first part I talked about um, how we kind of got into these spaces, especially those of us that were raised in church. So to potentially answer the question, or at least give a little bit of, a caveat, or hey, have we considered this as a community? Is what we learn from the pulpit. We are. I no longer consider myself Christian.
Okay.
Is based on the religion. I still have my relationship. I view God in a much bigger space than I did when I was Christian. And when I sought out adults to talk about the things that were happening, to talk about issues I had with my mom, to talk about these spaces in church. There was a lot of failure there. And even in me being completely honest with you, the reverend that I grew up with, when I went to him to talk about my mom, he hit on me. So it was a huge thing for me to go, you know what? I gotta go. And for me, it was a safe space for me to walk away. And so what I think why these conversations are not talked about in the Black home is because they are shamed in the Black church. Wow. Everybody, this is something that I said on the slide, is just because you are not raised in church does not mean the church does not affect you.
Yeah.
So right. It is a lot of things that go unsaid in our community come from someone's pulpit, come from someone's space that, you know, we don't air our laundry in the street. We don't talk about this, we don't do that. People are suffering.
Right.
Silently and not so silently because of that choice. And because we tend to uplift cishet men, especially in the Black church, the harm that they cause is usually swept under the rug. Well, most of the time swept under the rug. And then you have a lot of cishet women that cover that for them, because we can't speak ill of the man of the cloth, regardless of the harm that they're causing. So then you take that, you come home from church, and you're applying that logic, whether intentionally or not, to your household. So if your son does something where they harm your daughter, whether curiosity or any of those things, we're not necessarily going to shame him. We're going to ask her, what was she doing to cause him to do that thing? Like, it's a vicious cycle. And not many people are willing to have the conversation and go, hey, this is wrong. No, let's not even talk about the spaces of how this is not innate to us. This is not something that comes from us as far as like the Christianity that we know in this country. Let's not even talk about that.
Right.
Even from the space where so-and-so, like, I was raised in church. I went to private schools, plural. I know the ins and outs. I praise danced. I sang on the choir. I was youth president. I did everything you were supposed to do outside of being an usher. And church hurt is real.
It is real. Very real.
Right. I was harmed by my old reverend. I was harmed by people that covered for him and just acknowledge, well, that's just how he is. And then you take that home. And then it's, well, that's just how he is. Like, no. How long are we going to continue down that path? And then you wonder why youth suicide is the number that it is. You wonder why our generation, millennials, are leaving the church in droves. You wonder why. And deciding that we want to go into ATR spaces. We want to check out other religions. We want to be in spaces where we feel like we are safe to be who we are. If we're LGBT, if we're dealing with harm that has come from these spaces, and we're trying to unpack the things that have happened to us at home. Where can we go? Because the church has proven itself to be unsafe. And let's not even talk about how the church does not talk about sex outside of a man and a woman inside marriage.
Very right. No, you're right.
We don't talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I want to, and I don't have to make this apology, but I want to say, I'm sorry that you experienced those things in church. I've experienced church hurt in other ways. I do identify as being a Christian, not the religious aspect of Christian. I believe in a spiritual walk with the Trinity and what that means. And people could call me an evangelical Christian, actually. I believe that the Holy Spirit lives inside of me. And if you get the Holy Spirit going, then I'm going to get riled up and I'm going to
run around this room.
And so I tell people this, and they don't always understand. I live in the New Testament. Do I read the Old? And there's a reason for it. I believe that when Christ came, he tore the veil, or the legalistic things that put a barrier between God and man having a relationship. And there's a lot of layers to what we're saying, because we could have like a really long conversation about sex in the church and the shame and the secrets. And And then it's hard because essentially we know that man, white, black, or whatever, has used this text to explain doing atrocious things, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I've heard this pastor I love, his name's Darius Daniels, that the church is really an emergency room for broken people. So like everybody in here has got some brokenness, and you have to do your own walk. And I tell people, followers right here, whatever your religious or spiritual practice is, you need to know your book. You need to know your higher power of your understanding for yourself. You need to know your text for yourself. Because when I read the Bible, I was like, what Bible are these people reading? God is love. It's very simple. Love thy neighbor as thyself. But you have to know the God of love first.
Yeah.
But you're right. There is so much shame in the church around sex, because sometimes I'm just like, listen, if we shamed some other sins the way we shame sex, I mean, we could do some things, because God says there's no weight to sin, but
Yeah.
you will hear that sexual promiscuity or whatever, or the horror narrative. And it's just a lot. And you and I, maybe we revisit that on some level, but
Yeah.
it's interesting if we talk about shame. Recently, a friend of mine, she's no longer a friend, she called me Gomer. Gomer, as we know in the book of Hosea, was a prostitute. And
Right.
Hosea told Gomer, God told Hosea to marry Gomer, and God used Gomer.
Yep.
But could you imagine your friend saying, listen, you told me your sexual deed, so that makes you a whore? I hate the word whore. I hate the word slut. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. I feel like we have free will and free choice, and that does not allow me to shame somebody. Remember when Amber Rose was doing those slut shaming
Yeah, the
walks?
slow walks. Yep.
I was like, okay, sister, you do what you want to do with your body. Like we live in a country that's like, you can pursue happiness however you see fit. Well, no, that's not really true.
Right.
And there's a story in the Bible, and my followers know this. The woman at the well is who I identify with. The woman
Yep.
at the well had 5 husbands, and the man that she was with was not her husband. But the fact that Christ and God was still willing to offer her love was a transitional moment for me
Yes.
spiritually.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting. And I think that this is part of the discussion, particularly with people of color who revere the church so much. Because for a while, that's all we had. And
That's
girl,
all
we could just go down the gambit with that. And honestly, I'm so glad. Yeah, seriously, we can have like an ongoing series. But I want people to
Yes.
know about your YouTube channel and where they can find you.
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is actually named after my other company. It's called the Joy Element. So you can follow me there. I have not posted in a while, but the latest thing that I posted is a silent vlog. I really got into silent vlogs during the pandemic. It's actually how I got my anxiety to come down a little bit, when I just was like, I'll wake up and be like, ah, 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 and then I'll cut on the silent vlog and go, oh, that's nice.
What is that? What is
So
that?
silent blogs is it's an offshoot of ASMR, where the person's face isn't normally seen. It's like you're getting a POV of what this person is doing. So
Interesting.
it's really big in Asia, and they'll set up their camera and they'll have captions at the bottom, and they'll say, today is a day where you're going to follow me on my commute. It's silent because the actual person isn't talking, but it's the ambient noise that's happening in the background, where you're hearing the street, you're hearing the paw prints of their pet on the floor, you're hearing the vacuum, you're hearing the searing of the pot on the stove. Like, it's that type of thing. But then you're expected to know what to do when your Boaz shows up.
Girl.
And that's something I also talked about in that class. If we're gonna keep it a book, if we're gonna be real about the story of Boaz, especially when it comes to